Hello and welcome to week 8. This lecture is on patriarchal culture in Ambai's A Kitchen in the Corner of the House. So, the name of the author is Ambai. Right. Ambai is the pen name of C.S.Lakshmi, who was born in 1944. She became well known for the Tamil novel Andimare, and which means twilight, and it was published in 1966. It won her the Kalaimagal Narayanaswamy Iyer Prize, and she also was critically praised for her Siragal Muriyam short story Wings Will Be Broken, which was published in 1967. She is also well known for her feminist perspective in much of her writings. So, these are the other well-known works of C.S.Lakshmi: A Kitchen in the Corner of the House, published in 1988, A Purple Sea, 1992, In a Forest, a Deer, published in 2006. All these were written in English, Tamil, and they were translated into English by Lakshmi Holmstrom. Okay, this is what Lakshmi Holmstrom, a well-known translator, had to say on Ambai's work. She says that Ambai uses examples of food and cooking to highlight certain themes in her work: frames and boundaries, order, control and power relations within boundaries, and pleasures outside them. This is a very, very insightful commentary on Ambai's fiction. The critic states that the food and the cooking aspect of life becomes a metaphor, becomes a kind of a conduit to highlight or bring to the attention certain common themes in Ambai's work, such as frames or boundaries, rules and regulations, order, discipline and control within the human relationships in a domestic setup especially, and what are the other pleasures outside of them. So, food and cooking becomes an integral part to laying bare the discrimination that's underneath every human bond in Indian society. Okay, so let's come to the short story in question, A Kitchen in the Corner of the House. I want to first explore the significance of the title in this particular story. And the narrator says that we have a third person narrator in this story, and the story is almost episodic in the sense that we get to know about various events that happen in a big family in Rajasthan during a particular vacation in a year. So, the narrator talks about a row of rooms which are like railway carriages. Right at the end, the kitchen stuck on in a careless manner. So, again, the metaphor of the train is here used to talk about the significance of the kitchen in a hierarchy of rooms. And and the narrator says that the kitchen is just stuck on, carelessly. It becomes a kind of an add-on, an extra space that is added at the last minute. So, the importance is that it's not very important. It becomes the least important carriage at the end of a train. And again, train carriages in a lot of the fiction that we looked at for this course, it talks about symbolically the hierarchies that are there in Indian society. It could be class hierarchy, it could be economic hierarchy, and it could be gender hierarchy. And once again, the kitchen becomes representative of the female gender, and female gender are relegated to the least important space in a home, and that is highlighted through Ambai's use of the simile of a train. Okay. this excerpt from the beginning of the story tells us very incisively the importance of the kitchen through its spatiality. So the setting is itself significant of its place in the family and in the larger social order. So this is how the kitchen is described in the story. Two windows. The kitchen has two windows. Underneath one, the tap and basin. The latter was too small to place even a single plate in it. Underneath that, the drainage area without any ledge. As soon as the taps above were opened, the feet standing beneath would begin to tingle. Within 10 minutes, there would be small flood underfoot. Soles and heels would start cracking from that constant wetness. Kishan's mother, called Gigi by everyone, would present a soothing ointment for chapped heels on the very first day one entered the kitchen, cooked a meal, and was given the traditional gold bangle. So it's a fantastic description that talks about the confined or the very uncomfortable spatiality of the kitchen, as well as the rewards for being inside that kitchen and be able to do cooking in it. So let's talk about the nature of the kitchen here. It's a very makeshift kitchen in the sense that the basin is very small, too small to place even a single plate in it. And then if you look at the drainage system, there is hardly any there, because once the taps are opened, the flow would flood, and that would cause a lot of physical discomfort, pain to the person who is standing in that flood. And the narrator says that heels will be chapped, will be cracking because of the exposure to the water, constant exposure to the water. And the very interesting thing is that there is a reward for being there, and that is the gold bangle. The traditional gold bangle would be offered to the person who has become newly initiated into the kitchen of this home. So there's no proper drainage. It's a makeshift kitchen, and as I said, the women's feet at the basin would be flooded. They are in real physical discomfort while they're cooking. So there is a lot of inconvenience, and the inconvenience is about washing dishes on a daily basis at the small basin. And then, as I said, there is pain caused because of the cracked feet, and again there are rewards too. And the implication is that the daughter-in-law, who is the new entrant, and she is gifted for her trouble. That's very interesting. Okay, so while there is a lot of physical discomfort which is communicated through that description of the kitchen, there is also a sense of physical confinement. And that is caused by the restrictive view. Remember, there was a reference to two windows, and through one there is the vision of the green mountains, which one can see from the window if there were no clothes drying on the nylon wires outside of the kitchen. So physically there is a lot of discomfort, and there is also a lot of restriction. So one gets a sense of being confined in that dark space. And the narrator says that somewhere on top of them being the mountains, there was a white dot of a temple of Ganesha. So one can see those mountains, and on top of it was a dot which signified a temple to Lord Ganesha. And it's very interesting that it's just a dot, and perhaps there is a symbolic implication in that, representation of a temple as a dot, perhaps the women in the kitchen are not able to become closer to the spiritual entity due to various hurdles. Therefore, the temple is somehow distanced from them, and the distance also renders the temple almost invisible. And you can also stretch the interpretation to suggest that since the women are confined in the home, they are not able to have a lot of spiritual communion or even communion with nature too. So there are several implications there. The Green Mountains might have made one forget one's chapped heels, but since the clothes line was directly beyond this window, trousers, shirts, pajamas, saris and petticoats spread out to obscure the view. So as I mentioned, these aspects of domesticity, the drying of the clothes, the washing of the dishes, the cooking of the cooking of the various dishes for the family, kind of prevented these women from accessing the Green Mountains, as well as accessing the spiritual entity that was on top of those Green Mountains. So they have been distanced from all these aspects of life, the really important aspects of life. So the Green Mountains here signify nature, obviously, and the reference to Lord Ganesha is a connection to the higher entity. So all these two aspects which could alleviate the God and nature, which might alleviate the pain caused by the really uncomfortable kitchen spatiality, have been denied to these women because they are far away, and they have been restricted to these women literally and psychologically as well, because immense domestic work would prevent them from going to the temple on a regular basis. And you know, as I said, even the drying of the clothes suggesting that somebody has been engaging in hard domestic labor, so that all these clothes are washed and hung up to dry. And the funny thing, according to the narrator, is this: nobody seemed to object to this, this being this restrictive kitchen space, restrictive on several levels, the flooding of the kitchen and the curtained view of the outside, the confinement that they have to undergo while they are there. All the women who worked in the kitchen, who occupied that space, seemed not to object to its inconvenience. There seemed to be a quiet acceptance. And why did such an acceptance arise? Was it because they were rewarded for their slavishness in the form of gold jewelry? So that such questions can be asked, but the reality is that it was quietly accepted by the women. Now, the family in question in this story is a large one, at least in the slice of the narrative that we see here, and a lot of members of this family have congregated in this ancestral home of the Papaji, and during a vacation. So he is the head of the family, Papaji, and his wife is Gigi, and he has several sons. One of them is Kishan, and his wife is called Meenakshi, and there are other daughters-in-law, other sons, and there is the stepmother of Papaji. So it's a big family, and this family loves to eat and drink. They are great lovers of food, and even the women of this family enjoy their drink and the spirits, the hot spirits, and it's a common tradition among this family which lives in Rajasthan. So there is a constant preparation of a variety of dishes on the part of the family, and if you read the narrative, there are multiple references to cooking, throughout the story, from the beginning, the middle, the end. So it is one of the most important, or the most important aspect of this family, which is the preparation of food. At least that's what the narrative suggests, because it gives a lot of importance to the details of the preparation of the food, the variety of food, the spices that are added, the different kinds, the Mysore style, the Rajasthani style, chapatis, methi chapatis. There are multiple references to food, varieties of food. So and the most interesting thing is that every meal seems to be an elaborate meal, and there are elaborate snacks, different kinds of snacks which are consumed in the evening and during different parts of the day. So again, this is a wealthy family, no two ways about it. That's established. This is a wealthy family, quite comfortable economically and socially, and there are plenty of women in the story who help prepare the food. And there is one reference to a servant figure who helps in washing up the dishes. So the rest of the work is shared by the women folk. Now, the narrator spells out this facet of life. The narrator says that their style of life did encompass the kitchen, did include the kitchen. It was woven around the concept of the kitchen. It's a very interesting phrase. Life was woven around the concept of the kitchen. Kitchen became the center of life for this family. The lineage had a reputation for its love of food and drink, and even during weddings and even at other occasions, even during the evenings, they used to enjoy food and drink, hard spirits, both the men and the women. And the head of the family is also interested in the cuisine, in the variety of dishes that has been cooked on a daily basis. So he's in touch with what's happening food-wise in the family. And obviously this suggests that this family immensely enjoyed the pleasures of life, food and drink being one of the most important pleasures. And there's this idea of hospitality, which is mentioned early on in the story, and the narrative suggests that Papaji's family, the head of the family, Papaji, is very, very hospitable, and there is a reference to a guest who comes, and the narrative shows how keen Papaji is to generously feed the guests. So there is admirable hospitality in feeding the guests in this particular household, and the women folk, his wife Gigi and all the others, seem to endorse the view of the head of the family. They enthusiastically participate, enthusiastically I would say within quotations, because we do not know actually the thought process of these women while they are engaged in cooking all the various dishes. So we just get the external details from the narrator about the various aspects that go into the cooking of the meals. So let's take a look at how Lakshmi Holmstrom looks at the role of hospitality in Ambai's fiction. She says that, this critic Lakshmi Holmstrom says that Ambai also sees food and cooking as ways of imposing control within the family and maintaining boundaries between communities. So food becomes a way of exercising control within the members of the family, and as well as maintaining the difference between one family and the other, between different communities as well. And Ambai also seems to question the value of hospitality, which merely reflects the status and importance of the paterfamilias. So this is a very interesting point in the context of a kitchen in the corner of the house, because as I said, there is a reference to the hospitable nature of Papaji, the head of the family, and how he reacts when there is a guest in the house, and no guest apparently is allowed to leave without partaking in the generous food which they which he has been or she has been offered. So there is an incident which we need to look closely to look at the relationship between hospitality and patriarchy. And by the way, paterfamilias means the male head of the family. So there is a guest at the home of Papaji, and the guest says that he's you know, good with plain water. He's okay with just drinking water, and Papaji says, how can we allow you to drink plain water? At least have some sherbet. Very well. Gigi would get up, just put a couple of kebabs for him on a plate to go with his cold drink. And this is the suggestion of the head of the family, Papaji, her husband. Even before Gigi reached the kitchen, Papaji would remember the methi parathas which were made that morning. So she hasn't entered the kitchen. She's just about to enter, and then Papaji remembers this detail from the morning. About what exactly was cooked that day, and he says that, can't you also give him the methi parathas, can you heat it up? And Sunyaji, he would call to his wife, warm up a couple of those methi parathas and butter them. So he offers suggestions to improve on the food that was prepared in the morning. He would say, let uncle just have a taste. It's a very, very important set of ideas thrown in there in that speech of Papaji. And then Gigi, when she's entering the kitchen, she also thinks that she would also fry up some you know, eggs, just to make sure that there is enough food for this guest. So she also, you know, seems to think fast and you know, endorse her husband's view in order to make sure that this guest gets a good meal while he or she is there, he is there in this household. So the point that I'm trying to get at is this. On the surface, it's very good hospitality, no doubt about it. But if we explore this idea further, one thing becomes apparent. The hospitality that this family offers to the outsiders reflects on the status, on the quality of the family itself. So the male head of the family, Papaji, is very interested to make sure that you know, his status is kind of strengthened. His higher status is strengthened through the generous and tasty food that he could offer for the guests. That's one thing. The other thing is that as I said, good food and hospitality reflects on the nature of the head of the family, his economic status, his superior position in society. And the other thing is that that doesn't seem to come to the surface is that Papaji doesn't involve himself physically in the preparation of the various elements of the food. It is the owners of the women, starting from Gigi and the other women who are in the kitchen, who need to work really hard and quickly to make sure that this guest is given lots of variety of good food that would strengthen the status of the family. So there is physical labor in this kitchen, in this inconvenient kitchen, which has which gets flooded every now and not every now and then, all the time when somebody washes the dishes. So in this inconvenient kitchen, lot of work, variety of dishes, from vegetarian to non-vegetarian, from Mysore style to Rajasthani style, all kinds of food are prepared and offered to the guests in order to impress them. So you know, making an impression is very, very important. Making an impression is very, very important for Papaji in terms of his status. Now, the narrator brings out the contrast, you know, between the physical details of the space and its other associations. So the narrator says that all the same, the actual details, the concrete facts of the kitchen and its space didn't seem to matter to them. It was almost as if such things didn't actually exist. In their family houses, one crossed the wide stone-paved front courtyard and the main room before reaching the kitchen in a dark corner. A 0-watt light bulb hung there. The women appear, they're like shadows, their heads covered, their deep colored skirts melting into the darkness of the room, slapping and kneading the chapati dough or stirring the fragrant spicy dal. So the narrative again lays it bare. The narrative suggests that the physical, actual, concrete details of the kitchen didn't seem to matter to them. And my question is, who is them? Does them refer to the women who work there? Didn't they care about the physical inconvenience? That's one thing. Or is it a reference to the men? Why didn't they care about the physical discomfort of the women who work in that inconvenient kitchen? So the labor of making food becomes almost immaterial to Papaji, who reminds his wife about the methi chapatis and asks her to butter them up in order to feed the uncle who is there. So why doesn't it matter to them? Why doesn't it strike him? That's a question to ask, and the answer is not spelled out in the story. If you go back to that excerpt, it says that it was almost as if such things didn't actually exist. So the kitchen as a physical space didn't seem to exist to the men folk. They didn't seem to even realize the physical walls of the kitchen. And in their family houses, one crossed the wide stone-paved front courtyard and the main room before reaching the kitchen in a dark corner. So the kitchen is in a dark corner, and it's very dimly lit. There's just a 0-watt light bulb, and the women in that space appeared like shadows, not even like physical people. Living, breathing human beings. They were like shadows. Not three-dimensional figures there, and their heads were covered, and the colored skirts, the red and deep colored skirts, just merge into the darkness. The colors seem to merge into one another in order to become black. It's very, very interesting description there. So there is a kind of a physical and cultural chasm. There is a wide gap. Chasm means wide gap between the physical and the cultural aspects of domesticity, and the wide stone-paved courtyard and the other rooms seem to be on a higher level compared to the kitchen. There is a discrimination in terms of the spaces within the home itself. While there is gender discrimination, the accepted gender discrimination, there is also a spatial discrimination with the courtyard and other rooms getting a priority while the kitchen doesn't seem to, and that's very interesting. And as I said, the kitchen is in darkness. There's a very, very dim 0-watt light bulb, and the kitchen is a corner. It's not even a space that is confined between walls. It is a corner, and a corner is an indefinite space. It could be a corner anywhere. It can be a corner anywhere. So that indefinite space in a location, tells us a lot about the nature of the identity of the kitchen space and the nature of the identity of the women folk who work in the kitchen. They almost become identity-less. One woman is the same as the other woman. Their distinctive dress doesn't matter. A red color is as is similar to a black, or similar to a green, or similar to a brown color. All the colors become one, the dark color. And again, what does it suggest? So we need to ask these questions. So as I said, varied colors become black, and we need to again ask this question: why is the kitchen dimly lit when the family seems to function around the space of the kitchen, and there's a lot of cooking going on, prolonged cooking, cooking that happens across the day, and why is such a space relegated to almost nothing in this household. And again, as I said, if the idea of the skirts, the deeply colored skirts melting into the darkness, asks us to ask this question: if the skirts melt into darkness, then what about the women, the different women, the banker who's there, the really smart woman who is there, the new daughter? What about the various identities? And they all seem to merge into one idea of a woman who labors for the benefit of the man. So and again, what does this darkness of the kitchen itself symbolize? What is darkness there? Is it the darkness in the Indian society, or is it the darkness at the heart of the women? Is it darkness at the heart of the men? What exactly is darkness there? These are some of the questions that we need to ask in terms of this particular idea of kitchen spatiality, which is beautifully described and in the story by Ambai. Thank you for watching. I'll continue in the next session. Have a good day.